So as much as we want to say failure, 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 I think there's a lot to be excited about for the Pistons. I just think there's so much doom and gloom here, especially now that you're in the spring, and obviously the Tigers, not talk about baseball, but it's a little bit
We're
more
not talking
negative. So
baseball.
it's just, there's negativity in the air of Detroit.
Already
But
had my deck.
I gotta say, there is a lot more. There's a lot more to be excited about than people say. And
Hey, welcome back. It's like episode 9 or something like that. Fans without credentials, no elitists, no gatekeepers. I mean, because we barely know what the hell's going on from minute to minute anyway. So there's that. This is the spot if you're an armchair GM, and we're going to get into some GM business today. If you're an armchair GM, if you're a casual, this is the spot for you. We're happy to have you here. And along with me today, we've got Eric and we've got Jared, and Shane is rescuing some raccoons.
yeah,
He was found up in the UP, safely transported back below the bridge and rescuing some raccoons. So,
And if
anybody know anything about that?
if you've seen him, obviously
I
he's
rescued
got a,
raccoons years ago.
Go ahead, Eric.
Shane's got a full beard for what, 21 or 22, so he's playing Grizzly Adams today.
That's right. Greenhorn. That's right. Hey, let's real quick go around the horn before we get into this too far. Like any oddball sports stuff we don't normally cover. Eric, I think you had a nugget. Is soccer?
Yeah, hey, I did referee soccer for a few years. Don't be knocking the beautiful game. But yeah, quick
Football.
tidbit. You've got some warm-up games going into the World Cup here. And Team USA just beat a higher rated Senegal team 3-2. And they've got one more warm-up, I believe, against Germany before pool play starts. Woohoo!
Warm up or blitzkrieg? That's not going to go. This is the men's team we're talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, most teams are ranked higher than them, so that's a.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
I'm not
a
sure
start.
exactly where they're ranked right now. I might have to look that up while we're going on today. But with their coach right now, Pochettino, I think he's getting them to where they're playing pretty decent right now, and hopefully he's got the right squad in place. Pulisic actually. Christian Pulisic, who's basically Captain America right now, goal and an assist today. So he's going to be in tune, hopefully, for a nice run.
Awesome.
Well, one of the things too we've seen, at least my impression on the men's team, is you're seeing a lot more Latin American, guys that obviously are Americans, but they have ancestry maybe a generation or two removed from Latin American countries, and that infusion of sort of some soccer, genes, that culture, and we're getting away from the hoity-toity, Duke University and UNC culture, right? Like you got to be one of these silver spoon prep school babies, but now we're seeing some some real dogs getting in there. So
Yeah,
I mean, there's a chance.
And a lot more of what you see now is you're seeing a lot more American names overseas on recognizable teams too. And the tradition for men's soccer in the U.S. was like men's soccer wasn't good enough. You've got the women that are winning World Cup after World Cup, but now you're seeing more American names on recognizable teams over in the Premier League and Serie A and leagues like that. And so obviously the players are better. And so if you can get these guys to come together and stay healthy, and maybe you can get a deep run.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Be a nice change. See the men pull their weight there as far as U.S. soccer is concerned.
Yeah. So there's my tidbit.
Jared,
for the day.
what did you find? You've been busy, man. What have you found out there?
Well, I know that we don't really talk about tennis going on, but the French Open's been going on, which is my second favorite of the 4 Grand Slams. And in the second round, there's a pretty big upset. Number 1 in the world, Yannick Sinner. He was up 2 sets and ended up losing the third in a tiebreaker and then losing 18 of the last 20 games to blow a 2-0 lead and losing the second round to the the brother of there's two brothers, the Cerundolo brothers from Argentina, and the worst of the two, the one that was not ranked, knocks out Sinner in the first round. So big upset there in Roland Garros.
Wow.
Nice.
And I know he's getting advanced in age though. But didn't Djokovic lose the other day too? Novak.
I don't keep up that much.
Okay. He's
yeah,
usually. I
he's
think
to
he's
like
like
a
like the top
rookie.
5 or something like that. But yeah, he got upset
Yeah.
the other day too and is already out.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
definitely.
I believe it was like an 18 or 19-year-old. It was a young guy, like brand new in the circuit. So
Awesome.
yeah, shaking things up out there. I saw one thing, and this is the poll question because I don't remember the UFC fighter's name. I should. Undefeated at like 29-0, and compared to UFC 29-0, is that better or not than professional boxer Mayweather 50-0? And yes or no, and why, Jared?
From what I know, which is really, a few breadcrumbs, I would say 29-0 seems more impressive. From what I understand, UFC seems like a overall more physical and higher populous sport, so the competition's likely higher, but I could be blowing smoke.
I grew
No,
up.
you're not, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Eric.
I grew up on Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvelous Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns and that era of boxing, and then the early Mike Tyson. But UFC is just something different. There's just the toughness about those guys. I mean, if you put them one on one in a dark alley, I'll take the UFC guy any day.
Oh, for sure.
I agree with you now. And here's the thing: like, if you were to go back in time to the days of Leonard and Tommy Hearns and Roberto Duran and Marvin Hagler, these guys didn't duck each other
No.
at all. They were looking for those. They wanted to fight each other. Those big names, man,
yeah,
and they wanted to prove.
ABC's Wide World of Sports in 15 rounds too.
And so, well, yeah, which, they found out was probably not the best idea, but back then those guys fought each other like the best fought the best, and it was wonderful. It was the golden era of boxing. And now boxing is all about reputation management and opponent management. UFC, on the other hand, you either fight who Dana White pits you up against, which, supposed to be, all of these fights are matched based on what's going to be the most exciting for the fans, which oftentimes is the best guys. And look, you either fight the card you're given or get out. That's kind of like, I love it. I wish boxing did that these days. You wouldn't have had to wait an extra 5 years for Mayweather and Pacquiao.
Well, what I started not liking about boxing and what happens with some of the UFC is a lot of it becomes about the show too. In boxing back then, you had Prince Nassim Hamed. I think he was lightweight or a cruiserweight or something like that. But he had the stage presence was bigger than his boxing ability. And so he had a following, and now you get with some of these UFC guys. I'm a huge Conor McGregor fan, but yet it's all about his pressers more than his ability in the ring these days.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think he kind of topped out as far as skill goes. I mean, one of the guys, the guy that we were talking about was 29-0, was one of the guys that just throttled himself. So yeah. So, at any rate, we got a good show today, I think.
I think so. I think we're
That's
gonna
great.
have some
Of
fun.
course.
What are we talking about?
What
I
are
got
we
some
talking
Red Wings
about today?
stuff. I got some Red Wings front office stuff, and we were going to get into basketball. So now we've got the final set, and of course we'll end with predictions. We've got Jalen Duren made third team NBA. What did that do? Well, it made him eligible for a max contract, and that'll be his first pro contract after his first, it'll be his first new contract as a pro. And so he can go for the max deal. He's a restricted free agent, so there's some implications with that we should talk about. As far as what do the Pistons do? What does Duren do? And rather, for me, it's what the Pistons shouldn't do. And then we've got, Cleveland got just absolutely steamrolled by the New York Knicks, and man, I don't know, are the Knicks that much better or what? And who do we blame for this meltdown in Detroit against Cleveland. We lost game 7 at home. Absolutely ridiculous. So I
Blue
guess we're going to get into all that
Orange
stuff.
and blue sky.
And then whatever else comes up along the way. So, hey, let me kick it off with the Red Wings. You know, we had a rant, and Michaela was kind enough to join us for that.
Yep.
A rant about the Wings season. We're getting ready for the finals. We've got 2 really good teams for Stanley Cup Finals this year. Las Vegas. Las Vegas.
With
Golden Knights and the Carolina
Yes, one of my teams.
and the Carolina Hurricanes. And both of those teams did a really nice job against their opponents. Like Vegas lost the first one and came back and it wasn't, yeah, and absolutely controlled the series from that point on. And Carolina, they lost their first one against Montreal and came back and won the next 4 straight. So Brindamore's got a heck of a program down there in Carolina and a great program over there in Vegas too. This is they're becoming a regular making a regular appearance here deep in the Stanley Cup playoffs, seems like year to year.
Well, real quick,
but-
Tom, it seems like the
Yeah.
Golden Knights are becoming the new West Coast version of the Red Wings and Avalanche because that rivalry is pretty good these days.
You know, that's the thing. They took Colorado, who was a President Cup winner, so they had the best regular season record of any team in the NHL this year, and yeah, they took care of business, man. They took care of Colorado. You know, and they've got a couple other teams that are pretty good out there too. Minnesota Wild, good team, and Utah, for being a brand new-ish kind of team, really played Vegas. They unfortunately drew Vegas in the first round, and that was the end for them. But man, what a physical, exciting series that was. So a lot of depth and quality. I mean, Dallas is a good team as well out there in the West. Good Western Conference showing in the playoffs, and not bad in the Eastern Conference either. And what's interesting about Montreal getting to the Eastern Conference Finals is this is a team that was behind Detroit just a couple of years ago as far as the assessment on their whole structure. And they have already made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and left Detroit in the dust. And one of the key reasons that people attribute that to is the last 2 off seasons, Montreal has been very busy with trades and free agents. And so we're talking about, you know, professional scouts having to be on top of their game, the A+ game, and have loaded that roster to the point where, you know, they don't have superstars per se, but they've got the right combination of players to make a deep playoff run. And that's frustrating for a Wings fan, right? And Jared, I know you're not much of a hockey guy, but Eric is, and from an organizational standpoint, I don't think it matters what sport you're in. You're trying to keep up or pass your peers. And so if you find a basketball reference that looks similar, feel free to chime in, Jared, because again, this isn't solely hockey. This is today, I think we focus on the front office for the Red Wings.
Well, how many Detroit
And
sports are
if
we
you were
talking
to-
about front office these days, though, too? So you can just pick a sport right now.
Right. Well, there's kind of a common thread, isn't there, Eric? If you were to point at one thing in terms of the organization, Eric, in the front office, since that's our focus today, what do you think? What do you think that is?
Well, the people that know me, I'll just say it pretty simple. Everyone's too nice. There are too many people pleasers.
Well,
You've got a job to do. Do your job or get out.
why do you think that is, though?
Well, I mean, how many?
Why is that?
I think we're in this Red Wings segment right now, and you want to keep talking about the friends and family discount because you've got all these people that are all buddies and exchange Christmas cards with everyone, you know, and they can't wear separate hats. They've got to keep that same hat on as I'm going to protect my buddy or whatever. Where you've got to, it doesn't, friends are friends, business is business. And you've got to differentiate that, and you've got no excuses. Show me results, or let's get somebody else.
Well, and that's the thing, kind of where I'm coming from is, you know, the whole fire Yzerman thing, and I don't think we've arrived at that point just yet, but we're getting close. And I think if he doesn't make some significant changes, at least to the structure and to some degree personnel in the front office, then yeah, the fire Yzerman mantra is probably it needs to be legitimized, right? And they just need to look at moving on because they can't continue down this road. And he said as much. We don't have enough good players. We need better players,
I'll,
right? We talked about that.
I'll give you
Well,
another ism
the
real quick.
issue isn't.
Show me
Go
a
ahead.
nice guy. I'll show you a gracious loser.
So if we go back, and one of the arguments that a lot of the Iserbots love to use is, well, look at it, it took him a while in Tampa, and and look at all the success he had. I want to point to one guy he had on his staff that made the difference. That was Pat Verbeek. Pat Verbeek, who was a former teammate for a little while, played in Detroit, was part of one or two of the Cup winning teams. Was solid talent evaluator, really, really good at that. And, Yzerman came up here and Verbeek didn't come with him. Verbeek has moved on, or maybe he came with him to start with, but has moved on and is doing great things for another team. So, which happened to get all the way into, deep Stanley Cup playoff run the last couple of years. So let's start with that. Director of pro scouting for Yzerman, assistant general manager. So it's a guy he trusted. And like you said, Eric, if you look at our biggest weakness, which in my opinion is player pro scouting, you got Kirk Maltby, who is one of the executives in there. They haven't had a lead executive since Mark Howe retired when Yzerman came on board. Mark Howe, Hall of Fame player, Gordy's son, might know something about the game. But he retired. And Verbeek didn't come with Yzerman. And so that position, director of pro player scouting, has been vacant ever since. And that leaves you with Kurt Maltby and kind of Draper, but he's more focused on amateur scouting. You've got Chris Yzerman, Steve's brother, who, I mean, he's there. There's a lot of guys that are there. I don't know that he's being well served by his friends and family in that department. And to your point, I think that may be why the kid gloves, because he is too close with some of these guys. And Verbeek, it worked out, with Verbeek. But it's not working out here. With what he's got.
Sometimes to get ahead in life, you got to say goodbye to people.
Yeah. Well, and here's the problem. We haven't seen a move yet. And my suggestion, if I were GM for a day, Monday morning GM, the first thing I would do is hire an executive to take the lead in player pro scouting and be the assistant general manager, and just make that happen. No question. And it would have to be somebody that's going to be a little more aggressive. And this is somebody that I would probably have doing a lot of the negotiations with the other teams in terms of contracts, because a lot of people don't like to deal with Steve Yzerman, man. That's pretty well documented. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Do you think that's enough, or do you think that the fire Yzerman chants need to continue?
I've got kind of a double-sided approach to this. Kind of what I've done with all of our segments today, kind of did a side A and a side B. So this kind of may give you my two sides to this story or whatnot. And Jared, and I can give you, both you guys can chime in after this. But this first part I'm going to give you guys is the time is now aggressive approach. And Yzerman's been slow cooking this Yzer plan, Tom, long enough and holding on to this cap space for flexibility. And it seems to be a loser's game in this division. And so, with Larkin in his prime and the young core taking some steps forward, I think the front office can't afford to waste another year preaching patience. You don't get a trophy for having cap space in March. Yzerman needs to weaponize that money now to acquire a legitimate difference maker, specifically a top-tier goaltender. I believe we've brought that comment up on more than one show about goaltending. Or a lockdown defenseman. I believe we've talked about defense more than once too. So if that means overpaying slightly in free agency or taking on a heavy contract via trade, maybe we should do it. Because us, the fans, are restless, and maybe it's time to push in all the chips into the center of the table and go all in. On this side A, guys, a quick little response.
Go ahead, Jared.
Well, I mean, I'll just say I overall agree with that approach. I think that the slow cooking is basically just saying I'm not doing my job. I mean, your job is to try to win games. It's not to maybe win games in 7 years. And obviously, sometimes things take time. But I mean, when you're not making any moves to improve, it's just frustrating. And Tom, you asked about like analysis. I mean, for a comparison, unfortunately, besides this season, like the Bengals front office has been probably the poster child in the NFL for that. Just, constantly not paying people, letting people go. And even just kind of like the friends and family thing, a lot of, and this is part of the reason Zach Taylor is still the head coach, is we don't fire head coaches because if they play the game Mike Brown wants them to play, then they're not going to cause me any problems. They'll win maybe 7 games, maybe 5. It'll keep the fans engaged enough, and I just think I think that's BS. You never see any franchise that has consistently been relevant for decades and decades do anything like that. And there's a reason, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I'm also with Eric with stepping up, a more aggressive approach, and I think Iserman's there. At least that's what it sounded like in the press conference he did at the end of the season. He admitted they needed better players. Well, you're going to have to take a more aggressive approach. You're going to have to let go of some assets. We
Mhm.
found out that Sebastian Cosa in the Grand Rapids playoff run, he was benched for a different goaltender, right? So a guy that I hadn't even heard of before then, and you still have Trey Augustine in the pipeline. So Cosa is in my opinion, he's trade bait. He's absolutely trade bait because you're going to see Augustine come in next season. He'll be playing at least for the Griffins, and we'll see what we've got with that kid. And I think he's going to be decent. But we thought that Kosa was the next coming of Dominic Hasek, and that didn't pan out, at least not yet.
Right.
So we'll see how that goes. I don't agree with the positions though, and we'll get into positions another time. But I definitely agree with the approach on principle. It is time to do something, and that may mean packaging up some guys and sending out who maybe fans aren't going to be comfortable with. But, Detroit fans, doesn't matter which team we're talking about, they don't want the dead body of, ex favorite player to be sent any place for a superstar. So, I mean, they just don't. A lot of people here, they just don't want it. They just don't want to let go. The nostalgia, and it's killing this Red Wings team.
Well, let's get into the other argument or other side of this, guys, and get your response from this part, which I will call the protect the structure patient approach. So this
Okay.
this time, guys, the absolute worst thing the front office could do right now is saddle the team with an albatross of a contract just because the money is burning a hole in their pocket. The cap space is an asset itself, and spending it on the wrong 30-year-old free agent will paralyze this team in a few years. The front office needs to use this space strategically, either to take on bad contracts attached to high draft capital or to target a specific mid-tier value player that perfectly fits the system. And more importantly, they need to preserve that financial flexibility for when this next wave of young players like Danielson and Casper needs their big boy extensions. Winning the offseason spending spree sometimes doesn't means losing in the spring. So, gentlemen, get your response to this.
Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
My thing about that is, cap space is used to be as leverage, and the thing is when you have this money, I do agree going over to, just say, well, we have it, so we might as well use it is not the mentality to use, but saying, hey, you know what, there's these guys we could probably package, there's 3 guys, maybe we can get them for a total of, let's just say $25-30 million a year. The thing is about that is that gives you now the ability to now later trade some teams like, you know what, this superstar is great, but we're maybe going to rebuild here now. So what you can do is, we're looking to dump off some contracts. We need someone to take this guy's big contract. Oh, you might seem like you have a lot of space, but that's why you have these guys. You basically sign them to potentially be traded. And I think being like that's what the good teams do. They know how to find guys who, this guy, like Dennis Schroeder in the NBA, like, oh, we'll sign him because even if we suck, someone will trade for him and we'll get a second round pick. So like you have to be able to use leverage to these guys to get future draft capital to continue to be good. Sitting there and just letting everyone pick up the guys, even if they're not going to necessarily make you win more games, you just need that value and assets to be able to move to make positive change.
Yeah, the thing about the NHL, you're not going to see a lot of good. You'll see some depth in free agency Where you're gonna make your money is the trades, like Jared's saying, right? And and you gotta have the cap space to be able to take on, or potentially re-sign a guy if he's, only coming on a one-year deal. They don't do sign and trade, in the NHL, which is unfortunate because I think that would help kinda move some things along, a little bit better in the NHL. But yeah, I think they're gonna have something like $36 million in cap space coming into, next season. That is a lot of capital to work with, and here's why just kinda go through a timeline real quick, um, and why they need to bring in that pro scouting director, assistant GM, like now, sooner rather than later. Because let's see, the scouting combine started today, right? That's going on for the next week. Um, Sometime mid-June, they're gonna be able to start doing buyouts on contracts. There's a couple of guys to look at maybe for that. It's not necessarily cap advantageous because there'll be dead cap money depending on the contract, what's left of it. Um, that's kinda like it's like Abdulkader, the gift that keeps on giving. Thankfully, that's one of the contracts that falls off. Um, you've got a deadline for qualifying offers coming up, end of June and free agency on July 1st, and so you need to be able to get an executive in to have time to assess his roster, and not just the roster at the big club, needs to be able to see what we've got at Grand Rapids and over there in the Swedish Elite League, because it seems like that's where a lot of our, young, really talented players, spend some time. Um, so you gotta have that time to give them some time and space to be able to make some good assessments and then future good decisions, and hopefully it's gonna be somebody, a little bit on the aggressive side. The other thing too about the office structure, so currently you've got Yzerman is at the core, um, technically the executive vice president and general manager. You got Nick Lidstrom serving as the vice president of hockey operations, which is a lot of the day-to-day stuff. Um, Assistant GMs, that's being split between three guys. Sean Horcroft, who works down in Grand Rapids, he oversees the operation down in Grand Rapids. Think of him as the Steve Yzerman at that level, but he reports to Steve. Draper, who pretty much is dealing with, he's the anchor for amateur scouting. And then they've got an Aaron Khan, who handles hockey operations and the analytics stuff. Where we have the problem, as we said, is in the pro scouting department, and there's a few guys that are out there that I think would be winner winner chicken dinner kind of guys, if we could get them. But are we in agreement that probably something needs to shake up in the front office? And if it's not pro scouting, what department would it be?
Well, I'll bring it back to me real quick, and I pretty basically answered what I was agreeing with, which part I was agreeing with, yeah, I think it's time to be aggressive now, and I think it's the excuses are done. I think we need to see results, and that's about all. That's how I'm going to end that segment for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here, go ahead, Jared.
I think front office just like I think they have 1 year to say this is fine. If you said these words that sound good, now show me. And if you're gonna truly show me, maybe we'll give you another chance if you're actually moving the eggs in the right direction. But if you're just saying that to show face, then you can find a new team.
Yeah. So the three guys, we're going to start with assistant GM for the Florida Panthers, Sonny Mehta, right? So he's been a guy that a lot of teams have looked to try and bring in as a general manager, and it's very likely he's going to find that kind of job. Why would you want to leave Florida for Detroit? Yeah, that's a great question. But this would be an opportunity for him to really shape the roster. And if you look at what Florida was good at, people talk about, oh, Florida, they were so bad for so long. Look, man, out of the 10 years prior to their last Stanley Cup, they had exactly one draft pick in the top 10, and it was at number 9. The rest of them were outside the top 10, right? So I don't want to hear about, oh, they had lottery luck. That wasn't it. They did draft some decent players. Okay. One superstar, defenseman, as it were. But the rest of the moves that they made were timely moves in terms of trades and some free agent moves that were pretty savvy and balancing that salary cap. Now they suck bad this past year, but they're already poised to dump a bunch of salary and be able to reload And that's a lot to do with the fact that they're, you know, assistant GM and director of pro scouting has done such a great job down there in Florida. He was actually born in Michigan. He understands the regional hockey landscape here pretty well, and he'd be able to modernize the Red Wings scouting department like almost immediately. Now, another guy is Scott White out of Dallas. He's the assistant GM. He's working with Jim Nill, who came from Detroit, and he worked under Holland and was a valuable asset. I would say he would probably been a better GM candidate than Holland or Yzerman. But that wasn't what Ilitch family decided to do. They brought Steve in, and Nill went to Dallas, and what's he done? He's found himself in the Western Conference Finals a couple of times. They've had some really deep runs, had a great team this year, and they're going to run up against some cap issues this year, but they'll be reloading and shouldn't miss too much of a beat. So this guy is one of the dudes that was instrumental in building up this Dallas Stars team that continually makes a push into the playoffs year after year. And since Nill's been there, they've only missed out on the playoffs a couple of times. Now, granted, roster wasn't in the same shape Detroit's was when he left, but, you know, is what it is. And then we've got a guy named Gregory Campbell, who's the AHL GM, VP of player personnel for the Panthers. So this is the guy that's pipelining a lot of these developmental players up into the big club. And again, we've seen what that's resulted in. They were able to draft one guy in the top 10, and the rest of them have been kind of in the mids, and it's worked out for him. So, you know, again, 3 guys. Why is he a fit? Well, grit and grind Stanley Cup champion player himself when he played the game. And it's kind of the identity that Steve Yzerman and Todd McClellan are hoping to have for this team. Anything stand out with those 3 guys for you? And do you think we have a shot at bringing somebody in from Dallas or Florida to help fix this mess?
Well, that's the hard thing. And I think we'll get into that with the Jalen Duren segment coming up here too. Is it's a different market. I mean, it's a different market to bring somebody into Detroit. Just kind of the way you were ending your statement there. You've got to find somebody willing or wanting to be that that grit, hard-nosed, blue-collar, there's something about saying you play for or live in Detroit. There's something that comes with that. That's why everybody says Detroit versus everybody. So you really got to have that person that's dedicated. And you get some of these players that come in here and now they're all about this and setting the example. You go for the Lions for like Penei Sewell. I mean, you see some of his hype videos before they go and take the field. I mean, that's a perfect example right there. You need guys that are willing to die for this town.
He plays that way. And it's not just the pre-game hype huddle. He plays that way through all 60 minutes.
Yeah, see that wall right there? I'm going to go through it. You better go through the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing too about Detroit, okay, so state taxes aside, and warm weather aside, summers are nice, is the fact that it's the original 16. Like this team has a vaunted history. And I would think that a hockey purist,
I don't know if specialty means I don't know if specialty means that much anymore. Just like everything else that's starting to trickle down through the systems. It's hard enough to get kids to want to play for the college they grew up loving now, because that's all about the money for them now too, for a lot of them. So it's really, I don't know if it's it's original 6. I just say where the contract is where I'm going to go.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. Any final thoughts, Jared, from you before we spin it over into some basketball?
I can't tell you that I've heard any of those guys' names that you mentioned, but
you
know what? What I'll tell you is, I think, as someone who's, I'm assuming most of these guys haven't had a GM role, I'd say it'd be an honor to go play for Detroit. I mean, I do think history still means something. I think that, coaching the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Cowboys or, the Celtics or the Lakers, I think that means more than coaching the Memphis Grizzlies. So I think that there's still a lot of, if they're looking for their shot, Detroit's ready for someone. So I hope they get a guy that's good, because I truly don't believe that Yzerman has any real success here. I think we're seeing the tail end of what was ultimately a failure.
Yeah, I think you gotta judge a GM based on, a lot of how they're viewed is gonna be based on the staff, and the leadership that they provide that staff, and
For
that's what
sure.
it comes down to. So we'll see. We'll see if it translates. But, they gotta first they gotta decide whether or not they even wanna hire somebody, and we haven't seen any indications. There's no rumors out there yet other than the fact that people realize their front office, their pro scouting is trash. Hey, and at this point, I'd like to invite anybody who's, one of our viewers, if you've got a name out there that you wanna throw in there, if you think I'm full of BS as far as the front office, they're just fine, let Steve cook, please go ahead and put your comments in there. I I'm thick-skinned, man. It's perfectly fine. Speaking of failure, can we talk about can we do we wanna get into that first, or do we wanna talk about Jalen Duren's big payday? It's up to you guys.
Hey, whatever you want to do, buddy.
I'm
Go ahead,
I
Jared. Lead the charge.
you know, I want to say something first. We're talking about all this disappointment about the Pistons, but ultimately we have to remember that 2 years ago they were the worst rec team in the league by a large margin, and each year they've
Yeah.
significantly improved. And they came in here, they played 6 games, 1 year going the playoffs, and then they did it again. They had a tough, yeah, Orlando was not as good of a team, but that team has experience. That team has been a little bit more tested. There's more
Yeah.
vets there. And then you go and play Cleveland, who is supposed to be, and like, you want to talk about a disappointing season. I mean, this team is built to win a championship. They traded their young guard for James Harden to win a championship. So, they took that team to 7 games. Yeah, the 7th game didn't go that well. And yeah, Duren didn't play that well. But also, Duren's 22. Cade's, this is first time ever in the second round. Let's be honest, their roster is not a number 1 seed roster. It's probably more like a 4 at best roster. And they're still dominated for the most part of the regular season, obviously not in the playoffs. But Cade, yeah, he might have all those turnovers, but I mean, it's like what we saw last night in game 7. Like when SGA, back-to-back MVP, when you have nobody that can help you take some pressure off of a defense and you are getting double teamed constantly, you can only do so much. Obviously, great players make great plays, and we saw Cade do that throughout the playoffs. Yeah, he might have had 30 with 7 turnovers, but at least he's not giving up and he's trying. So as much as we want to say failure, 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 I think there's a lot to be excited about for the Pistons. I just think there's so much doom and gloom here, especially now that you're going to spring, and obviously the Tigers, not talk about baseball, but it's a a little bit
We're
more
not talking
negative. So
baseball.
it's just, there's negativity in the air of Detroit,
Already
but
had my dinner.
I gotta say, there is a lot more. There's a lot more to be excited about than people say. And as much as people want to call it a failure, I think the fact that you won a game 7, coming back 3-1, and at least took it to another game 7, it shows the heart that this team is made out of and how great the future really is.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I don't put a lot of stock in the regular season, and neither does, the other 29 teams in the NBA or whatever we've got in there now. And again, that's why we saw, the record that we saw. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we couldn't even win regular season games a couple of years ago. And they have come pretty far. Weaver, to his credit, got some decent players in the pipeline. He had some atrocious players in the pipeline, and his free agent signings were a little weird, but by and large, the roster isn't terrible. They're probably a player or 2 away from, being a legitimate contender in the East. I think if we learned anything, it's that you can't gauge the regular season as an indicator of playoff performance, because it's a completely different ballgame. And if you end up with Tony Brothers,
Oh gosh.
with a whistle in his hand, anything can happen, and, there's that whole thing. So, and believe me, San Antonio are ready to tar and feather that guy.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I mean, I still feel like this is a team that had a lot more potential, a lot more left in it. And so you have some that say, well, JB is not a playoff coach. And you can argue that his lack of adjustments, particularly in game 6, something he just, like the personnel, it's just felt like he didn't have the right personnel in there. And you could argue that back and forth, like, well, what do? You got Holland and Thompson, and they're kind of the same guy. And Duran's not playing well, what do you do, right? Like, and you got to be able, if you're going to go defensive minded, you got to have a lead and whatever, right? So there's that. And the other argument is Trajan Langdon. He basically didn't do much of anything, at the trade deadline, and they had an opportunity. There were some people available, but they didn't want to pull the trigger. And so is this something, no question those guys played their butts off, and you want to talk about Cade's turnovers. I mean, listen, that guy was carrying that team. Tobias Harris had some really good games in there, five games anyway, where he was in a row where he was over 20 points, but Cade was shouldering the load, man. And you get down the stretch and it's no wonder he was worn out. Why? Well, there was no number 2 option, no legitimate number 2 option for him. And I think that's the one really big missing piece, that and a center who is a real center who can actually shoot the basketball. 2 things there. But that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Is it Langdon? Is it Bickerstaff? Is it a little of both? But like you, I wouldn't put it on the players. I mean, they did the best they could do. Duran, how much of that was him just getting in his own head and being 22, and how much of that was, just not a lot of depth at that position, and they kind of took advantage of a lack of depth actually in the front court, or rather the back court. I don't know.
Well, my
Eric?
two-sided argument to this is, wow, we are flying through this show this week. The first half of this, that New York is a buzzsaw and Detroit was just, outmatched. New York is genuinely that good. Detroit shouldn't hang their heads. Cleveland didn't collapse on their own. They were broken by a superior Knicks machine, it seems like, right now with the run that they're on. They're playing perfect gritty basketball right now, and they physically punished Cleveland. And looking back on Detroit failing to get past the Cavs, the blame shouldn't be a massive indictment on the Pistons. They fought hard, but they lacked veteran playoff scars or that experience necessary to win that grueling 7-game series. And it's not that Detroit was a failure. Cleveland ended up being, for Detroit, a tough out who ran into a New York buzzsaw. And the blame probably would fall on Detroit's youth, and which you can't fast forward. So maybe it's just one of those, as experience goes, they'll get the grit to be able to push through these series.
What did you think about the coaching? What did you think about the trade deadline, Eric?
Well, again, I think coaching blew it in the end. I think we talked on a different show how I thought it was the way coaching was and the way they went through the series and the way they played players or didn't play players. I guess I should put it that way. I guess that kind of goes into my other side of it, and I'll just throw that out there, guys, too, about with Cleveland being a fraud and Detroit just blew it. Cleveland's collapse against the Knicks proves that they were paper champs all along, which makes Detroit's failure to beat them utterly unforgivable. The Knicks could, if the Knicks could dismantle Cleveland that easily, Detroit seems to have completely missed this golden opportunity to make a deep run. They had the talent to beat the Cavs, but lacked tactical execution, which goes on the coaching staff. The blame falls squarely on them for failing to adjust in the series and on the team's inability to execute in the half court when the game had slowed down. They let fraudulent Cleveland team get off the hook, and the Knicks exposed exactly how vulnerable the Cavs were. So basically, it falls on the coaching staff for me because sound like a broken record. They weren't the first half of the season team that we saw in the second half of the season. Call it injuries or workload or whatever you want. I think it falls on the coaching staff.
Jared, anything to add to that? Brunson doesn't play defense either. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think that's fair. I'll just say this, we talk about MVPs because we were talking about SGA earlier, and there's people that are like Wembanyama should have been in that conversation. Cade should have been in that conversation. I mean, there were people, Luka Doncic, or even Brunson to a certain degree. If he played defense, it'd be no question. But I gotta tell you, the winners, it seems like more often than not, the guys that are really seriously contending for MVP are the best floppers in the NBA, if you think about that, right? Wembanyama, I mean, I haven't seen a whole lot of flopping from him. He absolutely gets physically assaulted in the paint, and he's lucky if he gets a call. I mean, there's no flopping. He's tough. And Cade, we know isn't that kind of player. But, boy, oh boy, Harden Harden Brunson, can you imagine? Like, somebody's walking out of there with whiplash or an Oscar. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Well, listen, we kinda hit it, like, Duren was a disappointment in the playoffs, but holy smokes, he was definitely a force to be reckoned with, and yeah, I think you gotta look at the whole picture about what a player can do before you put him on an all NBA team, and he's not a scorer. They managed to find ways to get him the ball and score in the regular season, but, when defenses decided to show up and play in the playoffs, I mean, they shut him right down, and he doesn't have a great offensive game except for at the rim. So I can agree with that, but the fact of the matter is he was a third team all NBA guy, and so he's qualified for the max contract. And right now the sides, apparently the rumor is from ESPN insiders anyway, is that there's a huge gap between the Durham camp and the Detroit Pistons. What do you do if you're the GM, Eric? What are you doing with that situation?
Think you may want to let the market dictate the pace, possibly.
Yeah.
I don't think you may want to wait and see what goes be since you have time to offer, why throw a bunch of money out there if you think you might be able to get him at a hometown discount?
All right. Jared? Yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. I remember a long time ago, first time I was getting ready to go buy a car, and the advice I got was you never put out the first number, never make the first offer. You let that you get that first number from them, and that gives you a starting point with which to work, and that's exactly how you wanna see the Pistons play it. Now, if we were talking about Scott Harris and the Tigers, he's an idiot, and he would be throwing out a number all day long, but hopefully Trajan Langdon's a little smarter than that, and I think he is, and I think that's why you haven't seen a commitment, from them already. So yeah, so they wait. Somebody makes an offer and then they've got right of refusal or not. And but let's take it a little step further. Let's say an offer does come in. How much if you're Trajan Langdon, how much are you willing to spend to keep Dern in Detroit, Jared? Is he a max contract guy in your mind?
The hard part with that is if you don't pay the man, you could end up with a short-term type of prove it deal, which gets him into unrestricted free agency sooner, and you could have somebody getting a premium player who just made third team NBA with somebody that wants revenge too.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the only
funny, you
catch.
just said something interesting. You said something interesting there. Now, if he didn't get a 4-year offer sheet or a 5-year offer, I think the most that another team can offer an RFA is 4, right? 4, I think 177 is as high as they can go. Um, the Pistons can obviously max him out if they wanted to, but why would you? Um, but something you said there, Eric, if you were to go with less term and, say 50 million a year. Yeah, we'll give you the 50 million a year, but we're only going to give you a 2-year extension. And you're going to have to show us something. I don't know.
I
I mean, that
believe
would be that
I
would be ideal.
I believe you don't want to get caught in some type of way far off arbitration thing that we just saw happen with baseball this year. Uh, so there's that fine line, because you don't want to get caught penny pinching and it biting you in the butt later on. But you also don't want to overpay for someone who didn't perform in the playoffs either.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree he needs to develop his shot. He's got to develop a shot. Even if it's not at the perimeter, he's got to be able to take a 10-footer. You know what I mean?
And who knows if it was just
So,
mental because he had a Jalen Duren game in the playoffs, and even
yeah.
against the Cavs, he had The one game, I can't remember the stats, but it was an outstanding it was a Jalen Duren game, it
Like
seemed.
game 5 or something,
Yeah,
right?
something like
Wasn't
that,
it game 5?
but
Yeah.
then the rest of it, he just ordered up the poo-poo platter. I mean,
I don't know, we'll have to wait and see, it's one of those things I've got alerts set up on the phone. Google Alerts is all fired up, so if anything happens with Dern, I'm gonna get woken up in the middle of the night. Um, so we'll see, stay tuned. I don't know that I don't think they're gonna overpay, but I don't know. The only concern I guess I have with even 50,000,000 a year is it really limits what you can do with the rest of your roster, and they really gotta have somebody that can stretch that defense out and not double team and triple team Cade. So, anyways, that's all I got on that. We wanna do some playoff predictions?
yeah, guys, before we sign off, probably, need to get some type of, prediction. You got a Knicks team that's what, 12-2, just swept Cleveland, and you got the Spurs 12-6. Had to go 7 games to beat OKC, but I think we can be in agreement that the Western Conference is a different type of gauntlet. And
Yeah.
I would say that San Antonio is a little better grittily tested. I guess I'll put that phrase out there. Not quite Shane like, but but I'm working on it.
Yeah, no, it's not.
So, I'll just throw mine out there right now. Man, to see the emotion out of Wemby after that game, it's just he's got a different type of mentality for a youngster. He's got the old man's mentality for what it means to win things and to have a passion for something. I'm actually going to take the Spurs in 6.
Ooh, okay. Jared?
It's interesting you brought that NBA Cup up. I believe it was 124-113. I think I had that right here. But the funny thing is, I'm thinking, okay, the way the Knicks get up and down the floor and can shoot, I'm like, but after I watching the Spurs, it's like they can do the exact same thing. So you've got, granted, that one was an 11-point
Maybe a
win,
track
but
meet.
this is going to be tennis basketball with your Knicks just going like this all game long.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's gonna be a pretty tight series, to be honest with you. I could be absolutely wrong, but I think it'll go 7. I think it's gonna have to go 7 to get a winner out of that. And then finally, real quick, we've got Carolina, we've got, what's that other team? Vegas. Oh, yeah, they're back in the finals. 20 years since the Hurricanes were in the finals, Stanley Cup Finals. Detroit dispatched them. Um, the last time they lost a series. At any rate, who do you have? Do you like Carolina or do you like Vegas? We'll start with you, Jared. Montreal. They're going to the golf course. Go team, go. So-
I've been a fan of the Golden Knights since their inception. I actually have one of their team shirts hanging in my closet. And so I believe Jack Eichel and Mark Stone and the rest of the crew will win it, and I'll take this one in 6 games as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way. The West is traditionally, well, not traditionally per se, but the last few years they have been dominant compared to the East, and Vegas is a great team, no question. But I love what Rod Brind'Amour has done over there in Carolina.
I'm a Brendan Moore
That team
fan,
is
yeah.
yeah, well, Michigan State guy too, so didn't like him when he played against us, but I sure do like the guy. Um, yeah, I gotta say Hurricanes in 6 on that one. So
If
yeah,
you
we'll
wanna
see
see a
if it's
goalie
gonna be a
stand on his head.
category 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wanna see a goalie stand on his head, yeah, we talked about, Vegas, taking out the President's Trophy winner, which I think it's 13 straight President's Trophy winners that haven't won something like that. Carter Hart, the
Oh, it's
goalie
a
for
curse.
Vegas, is outstanding. So if you do watch any of the NHL
Oh,
finals, you gotta
yeah.
watch that Vegas goalie.
Redirections point blank. He is just so solid on good scoring, quality scoring chances. He's great. Yeah, it's going to be a fun series, Jared. If you're ever going to take a moment to watch some hockey, this is the series to take a little time and watch one of these games, DVR it or whatever. You can come over and watch it on my DVR. All right. Yeah. And we got one final thing. Fellas, have you ever heard of a national anthem standoff? No? Eric, have you ever heard of that before today?
Not before today. No.
Okay. Well, we're going to leave all the folks with one of the weirdest things, and apparently this isn't all that uncommon, but a national anthem standoff in Major League Baseball that resulted in a couple of ejections. So with that, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, and come on back another day. Here's our national anthem fiasco. Bye-bye.
Turf, and what we're waiting to see when this standoff is eventually going to end. Brett Suter and Chase Silseth have been out there for, 7, 8 minutes since the national anthem. And that's what's going on over on the Rays side. DJ Kinney has now entered the picture with Raymond, and now Chase Silseth is peeled off. Suter is still on as we are awaiting the start of this game. And when will the first pitch be thrown? The first battle of the day is before this game can even begin. And the umpires have taken matters into their own hands.
They got tossed.
Lance Barrett says, see you later. And the standoff is over.